December 15th, 2022. Any changes or additions to the minutes?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second. Motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to new business, instructing staff on how to proceed with the expansion allocation. Welcome.
Well, hopefully, about this time next year, we'll be getting near the end of the expansion. The first phase of the expansion and our current interlocal wastewater capacity allocation agreement states that when that's available, this current agreement terminates and we'll have to come up with a new one. It took several months, maybe a year of negotiation to come up with this one. So we would like to go ahead and start the process, whether it's complicated or simple, and on the jurisdiction's desires, coming up with a new agreement so that we can go to the state when we think we can do that and get them to allow us to go ahead and start allocating some capacity in advance. But we feel like we need this agreement in place before we do that. So open up the floor to thoughts about, again, right now, this agreement basically goes on 5-year average with some minor adjustments. Then the board is comfortable continuing with the 5-year average, or they wanted to do different ways of allocating, or what your thoughts were. Doesn't have to be decided today. It's just we need some input on whether we're going to put a committee together again, or whether the board's going to make these decisions. How you want to proceed with making these
Mike, can you hear me?
predictions? I do a lot of planning based on what people come.
Mike, are you able to hear me?
How much flow we divided up the first time? What the total amount was?
It was a little over 1 million. 1.1, is that right?
I believe so.
Right around that. Around half what will be.
So, yeah,
Sure.
you'll have
Sounds about right.
2.1 to divide out.
Well, how we're doing on that, Mike, with the allocation that we have previously allocated, do you know how close we are or far away we are from that?
That's a tricky question. Some of the jurisdictions have broken their capacities into different pools or pots,
Right.
for housing or economic development and some of those things. So while everybody has different priorities, some are holding it back for certain projects. Other ones are going ahead and allocating most of their capacity. I don't know what's the current amount available in a pool.
Yeah, in the pool. So what's happening a lot in the jurisdictions is that you have a project come along and that project gets, yes, we're going to support this project. Well, flow acceptance through the cities or towns and through WSACC doesn't come until final construction drawings have been complete. Everything's done. So the jurisdiction may say, yes, we're going to support this project, and then allocate internally the capacity for that project on hold, but yet the project's not all the way through design, all the way through permitting to a point that it's ready to go through the official flow acceptance process. So you kind of have two different pools that you're looking at here. So you have, for example, Concord may have a pretty significant amount of flow available from WSACC to be allocated out, but internally they really don't have much flow because there's this whole list of projects that they've approved through their council to support. They're just not quite all to the point to where they're completed that design process and approval process to where they're ready to request flow. I know Mount Pleasant has some projects. Everybody has projects like that throughout the jurisdiction. So the amount that's available that has not been allocated out through our flow acceptance policy is a little over 1 million gallons or so. I mean, it's still over 1 million gallons. That does not mean that there's over 1 million gallons that has not been allocated or assigned or designated to projects within the county. It just means that there's a significant number of projects that it's been designated to that just haven't completed their design or completed their permitting process. And hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully, yeah, for anybody, correct me if I'm wrong with any of that, but that's the best explanation I can give.
So
kind of where we're at.
basically where we were, because we don't really know what the allocations were from the municipality. Because they had pre-allocated prior to the agreement. Is that what you're saying?
No, this is post agreement. So this is once we had designated the flow out to the jurisdictions. Then it's within their purview to handle that capacity as they see fit. So for example, you may have a pool that you're holding for economic development projects that's not available really to be allocated out to just anything, but it hasn't been allocated to a project necessarily yet, but it's there should that project come along. So it's hard to say how much flow is out there ready to be developed or allocated to any project that comes along. It's hard for us to say that because we don't really know, because we don't control that.
To give you an idea, Lynn, Chad's exactly right. What we call block number 5, which is adjacent to the baseball stadium, is a building that we have already made a commitment with the owners to build that building. It's ready to get started, to submit for permitting and all those things. We have taken that and put that into a safety plan, if you want to call it that, for economic development. And that is a number we know we've already committed, because that's the only way that they're going to spend all the money to go spend the money to get the permits all done and everything else, the drawings and everything that's required of them. Same thing with block number 6. We have allocated each of those a certain amount of capacity. They haven't taken it down yet. So we have not sent that letter to WSACC saying block 5 and block 6 allocation is gone and committed and that, but we're reserving it for each of them. We know that the new owner of Mr. Murdoch's properties on the research campus has plans. He's identified what he's planning to do 1st, 2nd, and 5th, 3rd, 9th, and all that stuff there. We're holding that into a little bag of capacity too, saying as soon as you get there, get started, we are going to be allocating it. And council then allocates each one as they come up and confirms each of those.
That makes sense.
And what we're doing is we actually have a bucket that's in our economic development bucket. So even one step back, because we don't want Paige to ever come to us and have, from a perspective, to be able to say, we don't have the capacity. So we're actually holding it even on projects that we don't even know yet, right, that are coming, but we actually have this bucket of allocation to say 250,000 gallons is earmarked. And when we actually put something out, we refill that bucket. So that's kind of our top line on that bucket. And then we hold on to that so that there's never an opportunity that the county or city has to pass up on because we don't have the sewer allocation to be. So kind of to his point, like we don't even know what block that's going to yet, right, from that perspective, but we've even done that even a little bit further. So
The bottom line is what we're doing, have put in place is working.
Yeah.
And that's with the intent of.
and I think it's also been good to see each municipality. We were talking about this last night of how different we were even talking about from a meeting perspective. So we do our meetings quarterly. And Kannapolis said, when something comes up, it's put on the agenda, then that project is, but we had 83 projects or whatever the first time. And so we said, gosh, we got to do a single meeting for this. So it's been really unique to kind of share how different each municipality is doing it as well, and what's working and what's not working. We've made some changes.
But the reality, Lynn, is that we don't have enough capacity for everybody that wants
Right.
capacity. No matter how much we reserve for this one or that one or the other one, or for that safety alternative that might come along for all of us to be involved in spite of that, we have people who are complaining, why can't you give me my capacity? You have capacity, you have it allocated. Well, we have internally allocated it. And we are intending to put it onto those projects as soon as it gets to the point that they're writing that permit and ready to go.
That's good. If we could do it that way. One more quick question too. Are we doing anything else with Diener as far as the flow rate? I think we got it down to what, 80 gallons?
We're in the process of completing our master plan, and sort of the information that they're gathering on the master plan will give us some ammunition Dad can
Right.
speak to the details.
We're not right. We don't have anything in process right now. We're completing that master plan, should be completed this summer. That will give us hopefully a little more ammunition to potentially broach that subject. Well, there's also been discussions we've had with Diener to kind of bringing that up, the challenge and the frustration that it brings, that you essentially cannot ever utilize your capacity. You just never can get there, because you can get close every time, but you can never really truly get there because the discrepancy in those numbers. So it's not something we've quit on. It's something we're just kind of biding our time a little bit on to try to make a fairly strategic move when we do it, instead of just going before we're ready.
I agree, and that could be part of what we're talking about now, providing additional input for future allocations whenever we get to that point. This will give us that, what you call it, ammunition thing, right? Yeah, yeah. So that's good.
I think that's a good point, Lynn, because if we're going to do what Michael is asking us to do, it fits into the process of continuing to keep pressure on Diener to continue to move forward, because we don't want them just to approve this part. We want to get to the next part and the next part too, so that we can have maybe even something past 34 million capacity out there. In order to do that, we have to show them that we're planning, organizing, applying, and getting all the parts and pieces together, so that they can't say, well, you all sitting on your hands not doing anything. You got all this excess capacity you haven't managed. And just the opposite. We've met with Diener secretary and told her what we're doing and how we're doing it, and pushing her to help us craft a set of regulations for fast growing counties. That's how we positioned it, that we're not just asking for us here in Cabarrus County, that there's about 20 fast growing counties around the state that they need a set of a different look as to how regulations are applied for the future. And she has promised us that she will be looking into that. Chad?
And I think we have another really strong piece of positive news on our side, is the fact of the way that our construction is progressing. The state, I believe, probably rightfully so, is very leery when jurisdictions that give them timeframes of when they're going to expand and how fast construction projects are going to happen and how fast they're going to do things, because so rarely do they actually meet the schedules, whether it be a road or a plan or whatever it may be. The fact that we are following our schedule, that we're moving at the pace that we're moving, and everything will just be further good evidence to give them that we are doing the right thing. We're not trying to do the right thing. We are doing the right thing here, and just work with us while we're trying to move through this to support the growth.
I agree. I think a couple of
Ward, is
things
my audio working yet?
mentioned earlier, that a
It is
million
not.
gallons of capacity.
Mhm.
Now, with the allocation committee, and when we did our updates, which I think another one is due this month.
Yeah.
So there will be more capacity of what projects did come online for the last 6, right?
Actually, there's going to be a slight reduction in capacity. So I was going to hit that a little bit later. Our flows actually ended up slightly last year. So there is going to be a small, I'll say small, it's going to be impactful to everybody, but the fact where we're going to have to pull back a little bit of capacity from each jurisdiction. Our flows were up, can't remember exactly, 100.
you know, like Michael said in his report, you know, that the current agreement is intended to run until the earlier of January 1, 2025, or when we hit the completion of the expansion to 30 MGD. But the idea here is while we're trying to be proactive and get ahead of this, is if we can have a deal or understanding with DEQ to allow us to go over the 26.5 before it gets 30 completed, then we wanted to be in position to be able to allocate that at that time. And so it could also be an interim step where this board decides to figure out how to allocate that in the interim. But I think that's why, Michael, in part, why you're trying to get ahead of this, because otherwise we would have another 15 months until the completion. And so the reason we're bringing it to you now and starting this discussion is that you might want to go ahead and think through it now in case we are able to get an understanding with DEQ to use that percentage of the expansion now.
And there is a precedent for that.
We think so.
Yes, it's been done before, but there's not a clear cut way to do it, but it has been done before. And it is a reasonable ask. Another thing I want to make the board aware of, that Charlotte Water is pushing this very hard on their end with wanting to begin talks with the state. They have already had a little bit of talks with the state to begin allocating their portion above their 6 MGD. I've been trying to kind of hold them back a little bit because we need to kind of do that together. Because the last thing we need is developers getting permitted capacity of this new capacity in Mecklenburg County, but then come to Cabarrus County and they're told no, that we can't do that yet. That's not going to make anybody look good, and that's going to create a lot of headaches. But it's also a fact where Charlotte Water owns that capacity. They're writing checks every month to pay for this expansion and for that future capacity. And it's their capacity to manage from their flow acceptance process. So from WSACC standpoint, we can encourage them to slow down and kind of wait on us, but we really can't stop them because it is their capacity to manage. So that's another reason of kind of bringing this to the board now to begin this process, so we can try not to get caught where we look like we're not prepared and they're more prepared than us, or whatever that case may be.
We also have to take this agreement, every jurisdiction has to.
I was just getting ready to ask that. I was gonna ask William.
It's
If I
not
don't
just here.
recall, like, it's gotta go every jurisdiction and they, yeah.
That's right, yes.
Process.
So that's why we want to go ahead and get started. It's not that you need to adopt it right now or the next board meeting, but just go ahead and get this ball rolling.
So does that mean you need a separate work meeting or work session?
Think we can handle it at a board meeting? We can do that, or feel like
Yes, I would say what's the other items that would need to come at that same board meeting? Or is that going to be the only discussion?
March will be bringing the budget.
We're gonna have Crowder and Brown Caldwell come to give a detailed update on the project, but that's 15 minutes.
That's the only other thing I'm aware of.
Sounds like February would be a good time to begin to do the discussion.
Everybody can be thinking in the meantime of what you think would be the best. What needs to be included, excluded.
And that same month, that's where I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna make a presentation on the flows and the pot where it's at and all that. So that'll provide a lot of data for what we're gonna talk about. But then when we've talked about the capacity that's been allocated and out, we'll come with all those numbers and have those available, that data available for you. In February.
I would maybe like to add that we might want to make sure that board members are here in person. Maybe Zoom is not an option because I don't feel like that would, in my opinion, I wasn't part of the last discussion, but I feel like that's probably a better in-person discussion.
Enough for you? Enough guidance?
I want to make this, throw this out, on the commission, we have a quarterly summit every quarter. And we all the time looking for topics. And I suggested to the chairman that WSACC would be a good topic. And that's when all the municipalities are together. So at some point, we Mike, you and Chad, we hadn't obviously got it approved or anything through Steve and Mike. But that would help us inform the municipalities of what we're doing. And talk about the expansion project, how we come along with that and all, but just for whatever it's worth, and we had the one last night, so it'll be probably April before we have another one. But what do you think about that, Darryl?
I think it's a good plan to share it because there's many people who sit on our boards who don't know the details as much as we share with them, they still don't know. So anytime you have another discussion in a group where you might have more elected officials participating, be a good plan.
It'll help us to help them know about capacity, how it's allocated, while we're having to do it to start with. So what the plan is, and then of course with the master plan that's going to get started along the same time, all of that could just tie in together somehow. So the information's good.
Chad has a really good show put together, so he.
Sounds like a plan.
And I'll be glad to accompany him and watch him produce his presentation.
We had a community survey last night, went over that, we're very good survey, talking about all the things the county doing, should do and don't do and all that, but it was good. And so we're looking for topics and I thought maybe one thing might be a good topic. We had never had.
Certainly be glad to bring in the audience that we can.
I will,
Timely.
I will tell you guys, I was in a meeting today with Lily. On relocation, so not on, we're not talking about sewer capacity. Some of their executives flew in, we're sitting in this room. We're talking about housing, we're doing this and one of the guys in the back says, I said, anybody have any more questions? And I hadn't quite gotten through my slide yet. And the last slide I had was on sewer update. Because one of the things that they asked was, are we gonna have enough houses for our people? We're relocating all these people. And we've heard about this sewer capacity issue. There was a couple other things, but my last slide was sewer. So I got to the end and I said, anybody have any questions? And the guy in the back raised his hand. He's from Indianapolis. And he said, I got one more question. And he said, you're probably not gonna be able to answer this question, but I've heard rumor that Cabarrus County has some sewer capacity issues. And I said, well, that was right on cue. And so I flipped it up because I had the update of the plant and everything. But point being, that is a concern that Lily has coming here of we're relocating 350 people here. Are they going to be able to find a house to live in? Right. And so I think it's really important for especially our councils to remember sometimes is that the decisions that we're making they're really reverberating out in the community and people are talking, right? And so we've got to be the ones that are telling the story. And when we finished, he said, well, I feel a lot better about it now. Because it's also, we talked about the real estate market too, of like, it's all in how you use your words. It's all in how you set it up. And so we got to keep pushing.
And the more people that we can tell the right, correct news, the better off we're going to be, because there is a lot of falsities out there. We shut down, we don't have any this, that, so but the more of us that we can get out. And we probably had, what you figure 40, 50 there last night. It was an off night last night. But there's so many things going on, Washington, Raleigh, with all, for a lot of our guys work, but yeah, I'll see if I can't, hook maybe you and Steve up and whatever y'all can do.
Chad and I have been talking at length about his presentation that he's going to do in February. Part of the education of the community is there are 5,000-10,000
Well, there's well over 10,000.
homes approved that can be built right now.
Over 12,000 units. I actually got those numbers from the EDC because that's what I flipped about. I said, because that was the other question they had was, what's the inventory that's coming? And so I explained to them also multifamily, townhome, single family, we talked about that, but you're right. And I said, now understand that, like, by the way, those numbers were September numbers.
Yeah.
So there's more. So I need you to understand that. So it is, I understand the concern of it, right? And then you've got the market on top of it and the things that are happening in the market. And so it's.
We may be responsible in 2 or 3 years for a lag of what's happened now. But right now, there's plenty that's been approved and is waiting to be built.
Some of the developers
I know.
that are calling us.
That's our frustration. It's why this number keep getting bigger and bigger that we have it tied up in developer allocations. It's not getting.
All right, move on, Chad, expansion update.
All right. Well, good news, a lot of work's taking place. Crowder did not let the holidays affect them very much. Didn't let the rain affect them too much. Kept right on rolling. Besides the roads being a mess and the plant being a mess because of it, but they kept right on rolling. How do I? Yes, middle one. No. All right, so some of this I know kind of gets repetitive, but some of these tasks take a long time, but they do still have multiple crews on site working on the project, including subs, including their subs and their crews. I mean, there's 4 or 5 crews of people out there working on any given day. Crowder has completed many of the wall pours of the aeration basin. Actually, how much more do they have left?
They have 3 wall pours left,
Out of how many?
25.
Out of 25 wall pours in that basin, they have 3 left. So over 90% done on that basin there. They have completed excavation for the Neff junction box and actually poured the slab and vertical walls of that box within the last month. Continuing on the equalization basin, the new maintenance canopy pad is ready to be poured. It hadn't been poured, has it?
No, not yet.
Crowder has received shipments of some of the early electrical gear, and then we're still working to mitigate potential issues with sourcing equipment. Showing everything there on screen. Well, you can see here, these are 2 current pictures here. Starting to get really hard to show you from standing on top of the existing aeration basin what's going on. But you just have to kind of trust me there. There's only a couple walls left to be poured. But as you can see, if we had a picture back in August or so, there's quite a difference that's taking place there. This is the new maintenance canopy pad that's getting ready to be poured shortly. It is ready and formed up. The picture on the left is last month, the picture that Thomas presented of the Neff junction box excavation. On the right is current, or actually it was yesterday. So they've got all that poured and in place, and imagine they'll start pulling that and backfilling some of that here pretty soon. This is down close to our effluent flume. It's kind of 2 different angle view. On the left was last month, kind of the work. So if we're looking kind of perpendicular to this now, you can kind of back where this picture, where they were standing and took this picture, is where that concrete pour and pipe is exposed now. So they're really making a lot of progress down there on the new flume. This is a tough one. It's a big excavation for this 5 MGD equalization basin. Left is last month, on right's this current month. Hard to really see what's going on, but you get out there to it. It's kind of over that little pile there. You've got a pretty significant excavation taking place there, getting ready to begin the work on that EQ basin. That will take place over the coming 5-6 months or so. For the next month, they're going to continue finishing up a little, running duct bank around the plant, doing different things, complete the Neff junction box when I begin backfill, continue excavation of the EQ, continue excavation and shoring for the junction box 101, just continuing working through all these areas, all the open pits that we just saw, and continuing to work the work of the new maintenance canopy. One thing I would like to update the board on a little bit, we do still see challenges coming from sourcing some of this equipment. That's the biggest fight to meeting our schedule. We keep hearing more stories of equipment not showing up, not getting there when it's said to. That is probably half our time spent in our weekly meeting is talking about issues that reflect around, or concerns that reflect around sourcing materials. I do not see from Crowder and their subs, I do not see the actual physical work on site being a risk to us meeting the deadline. I see the risk to us meeting our schedule, meeting our deadline, being equipment showing up when it's supposed to be here. So that being said, just wanting to keep that in everyone's mind, and also reassure that we are doing, not just we, the team is doing everything they can to try to mitigate those risks and those concerns with getting some of this equipment. And electrical gear continues to be number one of the concern of actually delivering. With that, anybody got any questions?
Is this grading process a neutral site? That is, are we still having to haul a bunch of dirt offsite, or are we just relocating it to another place on the site for future use?
Both, in all cases that we can and it's reasonable, we're keeping material on site. We have a decent amount of rock from this EQ basin that we're hauling off site. It kind of was not enough of a volume to think about crushing and potentially using later. That's probably something on the big EQ basin in phase 4 we're gonna look about doing. But right now, the rock mainly is being hauled off. There's some dirt being hauled off too, isn't there?
Not,
No dirt, just rock.
not yet.
Okay, just rock at this point being hauled off.
Good.
So is there more blasting involved in this, EQ basin?
In the second EQ basin, there's gonna be blasting. The first one, I believe they won't know. I mean, they could have a few little cleanup shots they have to do as they get down through this rock, but not as significant blasting. We are looking about getting a proposal for them to go ahead and do the blasting for the second EQ tank before they begin the foundation and the work on the concrete work on the new EQ basin. They're pretty close proximity.
So that's probably a pretty good idea.
So go ahead and get that done. That tank's 2-3 acres itself. You know, it's a big tank. There's gonna be quite a bit of blasting there. And to get that out, that just mitigates. They're gonna price that risk in. You're gonna pay for it, or you can do it early. So we're trying to get pricing to go ahead and get that done, get that out of the way.
Any other questions?
Great news.
Jen? Were we able to get Rob back, or is he gone for good?
He's back, but.
I'm here if
not
you can hear
getting
me.
the Audio overhead. I'm gonna have him try, hey Rob, try to see if you can come through the laptop directly, if we can hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm on now.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be quiet coming through here. Let me grab
Yeah.
a speaker real quick and see if we can get that. I'm sorry, guys.
I apologize.
We can get Rob up. He had some comments on item number 1 that due to technical difficulties, we couldn't quite get through. He did send an email, I believe, to all of us with some of his comments, but if we can take a moment and get him on there live, I'll give him an opportunity to speak.
Lost the connection with the overhead speakers, so I'm not sure we can plug it out. All right, Rob, go ahead again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful.
I believe we got you.
All right. Well, sorry for all the problems. I guess it'd be better if I was there in person. I wouldn't have this issue, right? I did send you all the email. I'll be brief. I wasn't able to hear your conclusion on item 1. But being on that initial allocation committee, I thought it was important to at least share with the board or anybody that wasn't how contentious that did get and how much back and forth and negotiating was gone, which I think Mike and Chad can attest to. And I think any deviation from what we agreed to in there would take the allocation committee getting back together and hashing that out. The good news is I think we're all in agreement in this room with what that allocation committee committed to, which was just a straight 5-year allocation or a split of any new allocation that came up without any base amount. We did add that base amount in the first round, but everybody that was involved in the first negotiation agreed, hey, if we've used 30% in the past 5 years, we'll get 30% of any new allocation that comes online. And I think it's working really well. From Harrisburg standpoint, I've heard from Kannapolis and Concord that their allocation process is working really well. So I think it's something that works, and I would support moving forward with that. Anything else, I think we need to get more people in the room to discuss. That's it.
Probably didn't hear that we're talking about it next month.
Yeah, so Rob, the action item was that it will be on the agenda on our board meeting agenda in February to begin those discussions. But obviously, I mean, I think at any time, if we get stuck or if we need to drop that back to a committee, I think that option is always available. So certainly appreciate your comments. Glad we had an opportunity to get you back on.
Yeah, thanks for all the work. I know everybody's scrambling around trying to make it work. So I appreciate that, and I'll listen and try not to make too many comments the rest of the time, so you don't have to hold a mic up to a laptop or anything. But I appreciate it, and I'll sign off now and listen.
Good deal. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
All right, moving to public comment. I don't see anyone here to speak. So we will entertain a motion to go into closed session authority of GS 143-318-11A1 and A3.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And we will go into closed.
Give me just a minute.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Thank you very much.